Israel thought its recent strike would go unanswered, but Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has just made an open call for retaliation. This is no longer silent diplomacy. This is a direct warning that could ignite the entire Middle East. Stay tuned, because what comes next might change global power dynamics forever. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story revolves around one of the most shocking developments in Middle Eastern geopolitics: Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, widely known as MBS, issuing an open call for retaliation against Israel. This bold stance has come as a direct response to Israel's aggressive actions, which Saudi leadership believes have crossed a dangerous red line. Unlike the usual carefully measured statements from Gulf nations, this declaration was loud, clear, and unambiguous. For decades, Saudi Arabia maintained a careful balancing act, keeping ties with Western allies while avoiding direct confrontation with Israel. But recent escalations appear to have shifted that balance entirely. What makes this moment historic is not just the strong rhetoric, but the fact that MBS framed it as a matter of national pride and regional justice. Israel's gamble, once seen as a demonstration of military dominance, now looks like a costly miscalculation. The message from Riyadh was designed not only for Israel, but also for the world. Saudi Arabia will not remain silent if it feels its sovereignty, allies, or regional stability are under attack. In this video, we will unpack how this situation escalated, what triggered MBS's warning, and what it means for the region and the world. From oil politics to military alliances, from hidden rivalries to open threats, this is more than just a war of words. It's a possible turning point in Middle Eastern history. To truly understand why MBS has chosen this moment to speak so boldly, we must go back to the roots of the current tension. Israel, in recent months, has launched several covert and overt operations across the region, targeting groups it labels as threats. Some of these strikes have reportedly impacted areas linked directly or indirectly to Saudi interests. While Israel defends these moves as preemptive self-defense, the perception in Riyadh is entirely different. To the Saudi leadership, these attacks resemble unchecked aggression designed to project dominance without consideration for regional stability. For years, Saudi Arabia avoided direct confrontation, preferring to use diplomacy and behind-the-scenes influence. Even during periods of heightened Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Riyadh's official stance was carefully measured. However, the latest operation, widely seen as reckless, appears to have been the final straw. It wasn't just about casualties or destruction. It was about the symbolism of Israel challenging the Gulf's sense of security. Adding to the complexity, Saudi Arabia has been pursuing ambitious regional reforms through its Vision 2030 program, trying to present itself as a modern, stable, and reliable power. But when Israel's operations began spilling into areas of Saudi concern, it became clear that silence would look like weakness. And for MBS, whose leadership style thrives on boldness and decisiveness, weakness is not an option. His response is calculated to project strength, rally domestic support, and send Israel a chilling reminder. Actions come with consequences, and this time retaliation is not off the table. When MBS made his recent statement, the tone was impossible to ignore. It wasn't the diplomatic language of carefully chosen words. It was a direct declaration. By openly calling for retaliation, the Crown Prince effectively moved Saudi policy into new territory. For decades, Riyadh's leadership preferred private warnings, back-channel communications, and discreet negotiations. Publicly challenging Israel was rare. That's why this moment is being described by analysts as a turning point in Middle Eastern politics. The message carried several layers. On the surface, it was a warning to Israel. Saudi Arabia will no longer tolerate unchecked aggression. Beneath the surface, it was also a signal to allies and rivals alike. To Washington, it said Saudi Arabia is no longer willing to play second fiddle when its interests are at stake. To Iran and its proxies, it showed that Riyadh is prepared to lead from the front, not just from the shadows. And to the Saudi people, it reinforced the image of MBS as a decisive leader unafraid to take risks. This open declaration also carries symbolic weight. For decades, Israel relied on the assumption that Arab states, especially wealthy Gulf nations, would avoid direct confrontation for fear of economic or political consequences. By breaking this tradition, MBS has redefined the rules of the game. The calculated gamble now lies with Israel. Does it de-escalate or does it double down? Either way, the Crown Prince's words have ensured that the status quo will never be the same again. From Israel's perspective, recent operations were meant to showcase strength. The leadership in Tel Aviv has long believed that decisive, aggressive action is the best deterrent. In many cases, this approach worked. Regional actors thought twice before challenging Israeli might. But this time, the gamble seems to have backfired. By striking targets linked to Saudi concerns, Israel underestimated MBS's willingness to respond publicly. The gamble was costly in several ways. First, diplomatically, Israel's relations with Gulf nations had been warming in recent years, especially after the Abraham Accords. But this incident threatens to undo years of quiet progress. Second, strategically, provoking the region's biggest oil power could create ripple effects that reach far beyond the Middle East. Energy markets, already volatile, are sensitive to even the perception of instability. If Saudi Arabia signals it might retaliate through oil leverage or regional alliances, the cost to Israel and potentially the global economy would be staggering. Third, reputationally, Israel always projects itself as the master of controlled, calculated operations. This time, the strike is being seen as reckless, even careless, and the world is watching. Instead of deterring adversaries, Israel may have emboldened them. What was supposed to be a display of strength has turned into a vulnerability. And in geopolitics, perception is as powerful as reality. Israel now faces a dilemma. Does it double down to reassert control or step back to avoid escalation? Either choice comes with heavy consequences, and the Crown Prince's statement ensures neither path will be easy. Saudi Arabia is not just another regional player. It is the world's largest oil exporter and the spiritual center of Islam. These two pillars give the kingdom enormous leverage. When MBS issues a warning, it resonates not only in the Middle East, but also in Washington, Moscow, Beijing, and European capitals. The first tool at his disposal is economic power. Any hint of Saudi Arabia reducing oil output or redirecting its energy partnerships can shake global markets, putting pressure on Israel's allies to intervene. The second tool is religious influence. As custodian of Islam's holiest sites, Saudi Arabia's stance carries weight across the Muslim world. If Riyadh frames its confrontation with Israel in religious as well as political terms, it could rally unprecedented support among populations already angered by Israel's policies in Palestine. The third tool is military. While Saudi Arabia may not match Israel's technological edge, it has invested billions in modernizing its forces. More importantly, it has the ability to fund and coordinate regional responses, whether through allies, proxies, or direct involvement. MBS statement hints at this possibility, signaling that retaliation doesn't necessarily mean direct Saudi strikes. It could mean empowering others to act on Riyadh's behalf. Together, these levers give Saudi Arabia a unique position. For Israel, this means it is not just dealing with a military rival, but with a nation that can influence global economics, religion, and politics. And for MBS, that combination makes his threat far more than just words. It's a strategic reality. The Crown Prince's statement has not gone unnoticed in the region. Across the Arab world, reactions have been strong and in some cases celebratory. Many countries that have long criticized Israel's aggressive policies see MBS's stance as a long overdue pushback. For them, Saudi Arabia's open challenge provides legitimacy and encouragement. In Iran, the reaction was complex. On one hand, Tehran welcomed the Saudi warning as it aligns with Iran's own confrontational stance against Israel. On the other hand, Iran is cautious. Riyadh remains a rival, and too much Saudi leadership on the issue could sideline Iran's influence. Nevertheless, this unusual alignment of interests highlights how Israel's actions are reshaping old rivalries into temporary, pragmatic alignments. Meanwhile, smaller Gulf states are watching closely. Nations like Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE must weigh their own positions carefully. Do they align with Riyadh to strengthen regional solidarity, or do they maintain neutrality to protect their own economic ties? These decisions will define the Gulf's collective power in the coming months. In the broader Muslim world, from Pakistan to Turkey, MBS's statement has generated headlines and political debate. Leaders now face pressure from their own populations to show solidarity with Riyadh's stance. The real significance here is that Israel's gamble has inadvertently united voices across the region that rarely agree. Whether this unity translates into coordinated action remains to be seen, but the political momentum is undeniable, and it is not in Israel's favor. Beyond the Middle East, this confrontation carries enormous global stakes. The United States finds itself in a difficult position. Washington is a close ally of Israel, but also depends heavily on Saudi Arabia for energy stability and regional influence. When two of its key partners clash, the U.S. risks being pulled into a conflict it cannot easily control. Already, American policymakers are scrambling to find ways to de-escalate the situation before it spirals. China, meanwhile, sees opportunity. Beijing has been deepening ties with Saudi Arabia, especially through energy deals and infrastructure projects. If tensions with Israel push Riyadh closer to China, it could shift the balance of global power in the region. For Beijing, this would be a strategic win, weakening U.S. influence in one of the world's most critical areas. Russia, too, has interests. Moscow benefits from high oil prices and instability that distracts the West. If Saudi-Israel tensions push markets into turmoil, Russia could gain economically. However, Russia must also tread carefully as it maintains complex relationships with both Israel and Iran. For Europe, the biggest concern is energy security. A disruption in Gulf oil supplies or shipping routes could devastate European economies already under strain. In short, this is not just about two nations trading threats. It's about the balance of global power, energy flows, and economic stability. MBS words are not only reshaping Middle Eastern politics, they are shaking the foundations of international order itself. If Saudi Arabia were to move from words to action, what would retaliation look like? Analysts suggest multiple scenarios. The most direct option would be precision strikes on Israeli assets, either military bases or infrastructure. However, this comes with high risk. Israel's advanced defense systems could intercept such attacks, and escalation would be immediate. A second, more likely scenario is indirect retaliation through proxies. Saudi Arabia could support groups already hostile to Israel, providing funding, intelligence, or advanced weaponry. This would allow Riyadh to apply pressure without direct confrontation. Another option lies in cyber warfare. Both Israel and Saudi Arabia have invested heavily in digital capabilities. A targeted cyber attack on critical infrastructure could send a strong message without the bloodshed of a traditional strike. Finally, Saudi Arabia could retaliate through economic and diplomatic means, reducing oil output, disrupting trade routes, or pushing Arab and Muslim nations to cut ties with Israel could create a global ripple effect. Such non-military measures might be more effective in the long run as they hit Israel indirectly by pressuring its allies. What is clear is that retaliation does not have to mean missiles in the sky. MBS's statement was carefully worded, leaving open the possibility of multiple forms of response. That ambiguity itself is strategic. It forces Israel to prepare for every possibility, stretching its resources and creating uncertainty. And in the high-stakes world of geopolitics, uncertainty can be as powerful as an army. The greatest danger now is uncontrolled escalation. Both Israel and Saudi Arabia are powerful, ambitious nations with much to lose, but also much to prove. Once threats move into action, events can quickly spiral beyond anyone's control. A single strike could trigger retaliation, which then invites counter-retaliation, leading to a chain reaction of violence. This is especially risky because the Middle East is already filled with unresolved conflicts. From Yemen to Syria, from Lebanon to Palestine, there are multiple flashpoints that could explode if this new rivalry intensifies. For example, a Saudi retaliation could embolden Hezbollah or Hamas, prompting Israel to strike harder, which in turn could draw in Iran, creating a full-scale regional war. The timing also makes escalation particularly dangerous. Global powers are distracted by other crises, from Ukraine to tensions in the Pacific. A sudden Middle Eastern war would force them to divide resources and attention, increasing the risk of miscalculations. The reality is that neither Israel nor Saudi Arabia may actually want a full-blown war, but wars often begin not by design, but by miscalculation. And MBS open call for retaliation means that miscalculations are now far more likely. Ultimately, the question becomes who blinks first. Will Israel step back to reduce tensions, or will Saudi Arabia move from words to action? The answer will shape not only the Middle East, but also the global order for years to come. As we wrap up this analysis, one thing is crystal clear. Israel's gamble has proven far more costly than it anticipated. By striking in ways that touch Saudi interests, it provoked a leader who thrives on boldness. MBS's open call for retaliation is not just rhetoric, it's a statement of intent, one that changes the balance of power across the region. The world is now holding its breath. Will Saudi Arabia follow through on its warning? Will Israel double down? Or will diplomacy step in at the last moment to defuse the situation? These questions remain unanswered, but the consequences of each possible outcome are enormous. For Israel, this is a lesson that unchecked aggression carries risks, even against nations that once preferred silence. For Saudi Arabia, it is a test of leadership, resolve, and the ability to project power, not just domestically, but globally. And for the world, it's a reminder that the Middle East remains the most volatile flashpoint where a single misstep can send shockwaves across the globe. So what happens next? That is the story we will continue to follow closely, analyzing every development, every statement, and every move on this geopolitical chessboard. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Saudi Arabia will act on MBS threat, or will diplomacy win the day? Stay tuned.